Good morning, one and all. I welcome you all for day 5 special lecture series on the topic International Trade and Finance. I welcome today's resource person, Dr. Kempegowda GN, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, Government First Grade College, Calcutta. Sir has 9 years of teaching experience and specialized in the field of public finance and international trade. Sir secured distinction and 2 gold medals in his bachelor's and secured second rank and gold medals in masters. Sir published 12 research articles in international and national journals. He received Best Study Material Award for the International Trade Study Material from University of Mysore. I welcome you, sir, for today's program. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, madam. It is my immense pleasure to be the part of this lecture series as a resource person for this session. I thanks to PG Department of Economics and Commerce of St. Philomena's College for providing me this opportunity. And I also extend my thanks to Director Sir and HOD of Economics, Dr. Nandish HK, and Dr. Ashwini Madam for inviting me for this lecture series. Yes, friends. Yes, it is visible as a full screen. Yes, madam. Is it visible as a full screen, madam?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, friends, international trade and finance is a key segment of global economies. It is commonly saying that no trade and no development. If there is no trade, we can't achieve any degree of development. Being the students of economics and commerce, we have to go through the detailed study in this arena. But in this session, I confine to only basic concepts and basic concepts of international trade and finance. The basic concepts which are involved when we come across the concept of international trade and finance. Then we first should know what is international trade. You are already at the term, namely international trade. International trade or transnational trade is the exchange of capital services across the international borders or the territories of the world. Mainly, the international trade consists the cross-border transactions of all goods and services. It is completely different from the point of view of domestic trade. In domestic trade, the trade takes place within the country, but international trade takes place transnational or boundaryless activities. That is, the goods and services flow from one country to the other countries. That's why the international trade is the exchange of capital, goods and services across the international borders. Then the famous economist, namely D.H. Robertson, stated that international trade is the engine of economic growth, as he advocated that the international trade treated as the engine of economic growth. The countries can achieve the economic growth by using the trade, international trade activities, or engaged in the international trade activities. The international trade studies the relationship, particularly the economic relationship between the
Sorry for
sovereign.
disturbance. Sir,
Yes,
can
ma'am.
you please make it as a slideshow?
Is it slideshow, madam? Yes, it is visible right now.
So next to your animation, there is slideshow. You can click on that. So automatically it will come.
Yes, madam. I presented slideshow right
Okay,
now.
sir. Fine, no problem.
Is it visible?
It's visible, sir.
Okay, madam. Thank you. Then the international trade analyzes the the flow of goods and services and the payment methods between the nations and the rest of the world. As in the case of domestic trade, the international trade also have some issues with respect to the flow of goods and services and payment methods, particularly with respect to the forex market, namely foreign exchange market. The economic and financial interdependence is affected by, in turn, influences the world economies in terms of political, in terms of social nature, in terms of cultural aspects. Definitely, these are all things affected by international trade. Then we have to know why the countries are engaged in global trade activities. Why we need to engage in global trade activities? Yes, so due to because of, we have to know that no country in the world produces all goods and services by itself within the geographical area. Because the countries have diversification of resources. Many countries have abundant resources, some countries have scarce resources. That's why we can't produce the all goods and services within our own country due to because of the shortage of resources. The resources is not geographically deposited equally in all countries. That's why the countries are engaged in global trade activities in order to fulfill the demands of consumers as well as the producer side also. Then this image, this slides interprets the basics of international economy or international trade and businesses. Then we have to keep in mind the concepts when we come across the concept of trade and finance. When we come across the concept of trade and finance, these are the basic things that we keep in mind. That is the globalization, the outsourcing factors, the tariff, import, cost, customs, freight, documentations, the insurance, especially the exchange rate. These are the major concepts of international trade that involves. We have to keep in mind these are all things in regular throw. Then what is the importance of international trade? I simply go through these slides, namely international trade provides goods and services to the global population. In the sense, the consumers of a country can enjoy all the goods and services provided by the global market. A country can enjoy a series of goods and services produced from there and enjoy by him. In the sense, the world population can enjoy the all goods and services produced in any country due to because of international trade. Then the international trade paves the way for globalization. So nowadays, the process of globalization is common phenomena. It is inevitable for every country. Globalization is the continuous integration of the integration process. The degree of integration is determined by the volume of international trade. The volume of international trade determines the level of globalization. So globalization is inevitable for every country. As the globalization takes place, the economies of the world enjoys the benefits of international trade. Then it provides employment opportunity also. It creates jobs due to widespread market opportunities. The international investors or the foreign direct investment. The international investors always seeks to invest in the other nations in order to gain more profits. That's why they have always create job opportunities, especially in the developing economies like us. So the international trade creates huge job opportunities and also motivates the workers to produce more goods and services in better quality. And One more thing, the international trade is also impact on the global politics. Global politics is affected by the trade activities due to because of high volatility in the prices of rare goods, namely the oil goods and the rare metals, the trade activities in the rare metals also affected on the global politics. In addition to that, we have to know the differences between the domestic trade and international trade. By main itself, domestic trade is a interregional trade or local trade. What Wahilin, the famous economist, called it as interlocal trade. Domestic trade means that trade take place within the nation, within the boundary of the country. Both buyers and sellers are confined to the same locality or village or town or in the even different states, but definitely within the same country. But international trade is a transnational trade. It is a beyond the border trade. So domestic trade takes place within the country, within the boundary of the country, where international trade takes place between or among the nations. International trade is the exchange of goods and services between the countries. A product that is sold to the global market is an export, and a product that is brought from the global market is an import. So international trade involves the export and import activities. But we can't see import will get high value when we come into the concept of international trade. Then international trade consists of goods and services moving in three directions, namely imports, exports, and entry-port trade. And what do you mean by imports? Imports, the goods and services flowing into a country from abroad is called as imports. The flow of goods and services into a country from abroad is called as import activity in international trade. Then what is exports? The flowing of goods and services out of a country and sold overseas is termed as exports. The imports and the exports are the common terminology what we use in international trade. Then another important aspect is entry-port trade. What do you mean that entry-port trade? It is the amalgamation of both import and export activities. It is the combination of export and import trade, and is also known as re-export. Re-export. It means that goods from one country and importing the goods from one country and exporting to another country after adding some values, it is called entry-port trade. For example, if our India imports gold from China and makes from it jewelry, in the sense adding some values to it, then export to it to another country is called as entry-port trade. Majority of the countries also engaged in entry-port trade, especially the country like Singapore has gained much of importance and benefited through the entry-port trade. Then this slides illustrates the differences between internal and international trade in simple terminologies. In terms of point of differences, trade within the geographical limits of a country is termed as international trade. Then the trade beyond the geographical limits of a country is termed as international trade. Only one country is involved in domestic trade. Minimum two countries are needed in order to engage in international trade. Only
Hello, sir.
home currency used in domestic market, whereas in foreign only international market only we have to use foreign currency only. We can't use the home currency at international trade. Then the
Sir, your slide, hello, sir.
yes, madam.
Sorry to
Yes, madam.
disturb you. Your slide is not getting changed, sir. It's stuck on one this thing. I think why countries engaged in global trade activities. Stuck there only.
Yes, but
Sir, can you
it is
make it a slide share?
for you, madam.
No, sir. It is coming very minimum size, sir. Can you make it the screen is bit bigger, like screen share,
Yes,
slide share?
madam. Slides, I operated slide shares, but not it is
So it's not taking, sir.
working out, madam. Once
Can you
again.
just do it once again, sir? Slide share, slide show.
Once
Can you go to after animation?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam. One second. Is it visible right now, madam?
Yeah, sir. Can you just go to in the upside menu? After
Yes, ma'am.
animation, there is a slide show. Can you click on that button? Yes. Can you just click the from the current share, current slide, not animation, slide share. Can you click on slide share? Yeah, from current slide. Yeah, can you click
Is
on
it
that?
visible? Is it visible?
Uh, okay, nothing is happening. It's okay,
Yeah,
sir. Fine, it's
ma'am.
visible. Thank you.
For that,
Is it visible to you, sir?
Yes, sir.
Is it opened at full screen?
No, sir. It is not taking it.
ma'am,
What's the
before that,
problem?
there is one options update
Update
now.
now.
He clicks, yeah,
Okay,
remove that one, and
it will
then he
open.
can slideshow.
Sir, there is a one called option update now. If you click on that, then you can click on that button, it will open. Yeah. Can you click on now current slide?
Okay, madam. Yes, madam. It takes some time. Is it visible right now, madam?
Yes, sir. Okay. You can start. You can continue, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So when we come into the mode of transport, majorly in international trade, in internal trade, only road and railway transport will take place. When we come into the international trade, the mode of transport used in international trade majorly sea and airport transport that are used in terms in the area of international trade. Then the problem of balance of payment, the concept of balance of payment will not appear when we come across the internal trade. But when we come into the concept of international trade, the biggest problem the countries have been facing that is the balance of payment problem. So these are the major differences that we can list it here. The another important segment is the fundamental theories of international trade. I simply touch upon the fundamental theories of international trade. The first and foremost theory of international trade is the absolute cost advantage theory, which was profounded by the famous economist, the father of economics, namely Adam Smith, in his book, namely The Wealth of Nations, which was published in 1776. According to him, the fundamental theories of international trade tries to answer for the question why the countries are engaged in international trade, why the countries are actively participated in international trade. The first and foremost answer given by the Adam Smith from his the absolute cost advantage theory. He argued that the country has an absolute advantage in the production of a product when it is producing in more efficient than any other country. When the country is specialized in the production of goods and services compared to other country, then it is said that the country can avail the benefits of absolute cost advantage. This is the base for the country why the countries are involved in international trade in order to attain the benefits of absolute advantage. Because no countries produce such a goods and services at this efficient efficient level. That's why Adam Smith focused with respect to the absolute cost advantage, why the countries are engaged due to because of absolute cost advantage. In order to gain from the trade, they must binding with respect to the absolute cost advantage. And also the other theory, namely another famous theory which emphasized on the basis for international trade is theory of comparative cost. David Ricardo, the classical economist, demonstrates the basis for trade is the comparative cost differences. The trade can take place even if the absolute cost difference is absent, but there is comparative cost differences. Due to because of the comparative cost differences in producing the goods and services, the countries are engaged in trade activities. One country producing the goods and services at lowest cost comparing to the other countries, that country can be benefited from the producing goods and services and exporting to the other countries. All countries have to be involved in international trade because there would be always comparative advantage in international trade. So according to David Ricardo. The one more theory, namely Edgeworth theorem, the famous theory also known as the modern theory of international trade, focuses that this theory tries to bring out the real cause for the base of international trade. This theory completely declined the propositions made by the absolute advantage theory and comparative cost advantage theory. Completely, this theory tries to bring out the real cause for the base of international trade. According to them, the theory says that basis for international trade is the difference in factor endowments. The countries have different factor endowments. Some countries have abundant resources, some countries have scarce resources. The abundant resources will make the countries to produce more goods and services and make them to participate in international trade. The scarce resources which the countries have to import the resources where they have scarce. This theory attributes international differences in comparative cost. The differences can be seen in terms of factor endowments, in terms of production between the countries, the difference in the factors proportions required for the production of goods and services. The abundant factors in terms of proportions required for the production of goods is different from the one country to another country. So it is suggesting that most of the economists accepted this theory, that is Exter-Wolin theory or the modern theory of international trade, due to because its beautiful narrations with respect to the factor endowments. Then when we come into the terms of trade concept, terms of trade, the very important concept with respect to the international trade. Terms of trade is used to measure the benefits attained through international trade. It is one of the parameters to measure the benefits of international trade, whether the country is benefited from international trade or not. We can go through, we can measure by using this terminology, namely terms of trade. Then what do you mean by terms of trade? The terms of trade refers to the rate at which one country exchanges the goods and services of other countries. It is measure the purchasing power of exports in terms of imports. The rate at which the one country exchanges its goods to another country is known as terms of trade. It is always mirror of international trade. It attributes whether the international trade is benefited to the countries or not. When the export prices of a country increases, when the export prices of the countries increases, then it is commonly saying that the terms of the trade of the country can be improved, will be improved. On the other hand, when the import prices compared to export prices relatively rises, then it is said to be that the terms of trade of that country could be worsened enough. The terms of trade of the country should be in favor of the country. It is a measure of the benefits of the international trade. If the country has good terms of trade, the balance of payment of that country will be good enough. If the terms of trade of that country is not positive, is not in positive way, then it is said that the balance of payment of that country in the negative ways. Then, with respect to the terms of trade, the concept of deterioration in terms of trade. Deterioration in terms of trade, the famous theory, this theory focuses with respect to the deterioration of terms of trade in developing nations. The famous Prebisch and Singer hypothesis focused with respect to the deterioration in terms of trade. According to them, both economists, namely Paul Prebisch and Singer, focuses that international trade is not helping the developing or less developed countries. The developing economies or the least developing economies has been struggling much due to because of international trade, because demand for the primary products of least developed countries rise slowly in developing countries. The demand for the primary products produced by the least developed countries, namely the primary products are pertaining to the agri-field products, agricultural products, are primary sector products. The primary products mainly produced by the least developed countries, and whereas the advanced goods and services produced by the developed countries, the demand for advanced goods and services are much attracted by the whole world population, whereas the demand for the primary products seems not to be attracted as like advanced products. This makes some gap between them, then pulling the least developed nations into the what we call as poor situation. That's why that, and also trade unions also weak in least developed countries, as they suggested. Wages are also too low in the developing economies like us. So the prices of primary products, which led to the declining in terms of trade. The international trade is not much beneficial to the developing, the population belongs to the residing in developing economies or the least developing economies. This theory completely focuses with respect to the third world nations. So the another dilemma created through this hypothesis, that is how to develop the least developed economies through international trade. These questions should be answered by the World Trade Organization, which is the international watchdog of foreign trade. Then another concept in international trade is free trade. Free trade. Free trade policy refers to the no restrictions in the trade between the or among the countries, no restriction imposed on the cross-border transaction of the goods and services, no discrimination between the domestic good and foreign good. The countries should like to follow the same policies should have to treat the domestic good and foreign good alike. No discrimination between domestic and foreign goods in trade policies. Free trade ensures the cross-border, no restrictions of cross-border transaction of goods and services. This policy specifically supported by classical economists like Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and others. The government should not intervene in the economic activities as advocated by them. The laissez-faire policy. In terms of laissez-faire policy, what they told that the duty of the government is only confined to the policing and safeguard of the border of the country. The government should not intervene in economic activities. The economic activities should be free from government control, as advocated by the classical economists. On the basis of that, many classical economists promoted that free trade ensures greater economic benefits to the trading nations. But we have to rethink whether free trade is benefit to the nations or not. We have to rethink. Most of the nations have been following protectionist policy rather than that of free trade policy. Why? The protection policy is used to protect the domestic industries from foreign competition, because we have to protect our domestic industries from the foreign industries. Because the countries like us, the least developed countries, have started the development activities right now. They have not matured enough. The industries is not matured enough to compete with the international competitors. That's why we have to protect them for competition, from the competition. That's why some of the economists in favor of protectionism policy argues that the trade measures or the policy measures should be followed to protect the domestic business. Why we need to protect the Why we need to protect our industries? Because the development phase just started by the infant industries. Alexander, the famous economist, propounded infant industry argument that suggesting that we have to care our babies because babies are not enough to compete with the adults. That's why the countries like LDCs have infant industries. The industries are not mature to compete with the transnational companies. We have to safeguard our unmatured industries from the foreign competition. That's why we have to use the protectionist measures. Then, what are the types of protection that the country can follow? There are many measures, means and ways of protections like tariffs, quotas, the exchange control measures are there, import restrictions are there, and import license on trade brokers are there. These are the major types of protection that the country can impose while engaged in international trade, especially on importable items. Then what are the merits and demerits of free trade? So we can list out the some of the merits and demerits of the free trade policy. Free trade helps in specialization and division of labor of a country as advocated by Adam Smith in the division of labor theory. And free trade maximization helps to maximization of output due to because of no restrictions among the nations for their transaction of goods and services. The optimum efficient utilization of resources can be seen when the countries are engaged in international trade without any restrictions. Free trade assures wide market. The optimum consumption of the consumers can be availed from the free trade policy. Price stability can be established through the free trade policy due to because of use goods and services. We can also prevent monopoly activities in the domestic market also. And also it yields high factor income to the factors responsible for the production. And our free trade policy promotes competition and encourages invention at greater level. It also promotes international cooperation among the nations. That is very important at this arena. Then what are the demerits of free trade policy? So when we come to demerits point, free trade also responsible for the exploitation of poor countries. What the real world facing is that right now, as advocated by deterioration of terms of trade theories, advocated by Premis and Singer, the many least developing countries have been exploited by the developing nations through marketing channels. And also developing countries threatening to the political independence of the developing economies like LDCs or least developed countries. Free trade policy imbalance the economic growth. The unbalanced economic growth can be caused by the free trade policy because it divides the nations, developed countries and the underdeveloped countries. There is the possibility of the supply of substandard and harmful goods into the economy, especially while import from the developing nations to developed countries to the developing nations. It assures cutthroat competition. the very high competition will be non-benefitable to the developing nations because they are not sufficient to compete with the developed one. The spread of economic evils when the goods and services, when there is no restrictions over the travel of goods and services, the spread of economic evils is the common phenomena under free trade regime. The dangerous dependence, the dependency rate is high of the developing nations upon the developed economies. The very importantly, depletion of natural resources can be seen in future days. The natural resources will be exhausted due to because of free trade, because all countries are actively engaged in the production of goods and services at very magnitude level. In future course, the resources, the available resources will be depleted for the future generation. Then what are the merits and demerits of protectionist policy? Many merits are propounded in terms of arguments. So it creates employment opportunity when we follow the protectionist policy measures. Because when we protect our domestic industries from the foreign competition, our domestic industries will provide more number of employment opportunities by increasing their production activities. Then the balance of payment will be favorable, will be in good conditions when we levy some controls over foreign goods through protectionist policy. And then according to the terms of trade argument, the terms of trade of the country will be good enough when we impose protectionist policy on foreign goods. We have to impose some extent of control over foreign goods through tariffs, taxes, or import taxes, or quota systems, some extra. That's why the infant industry argument suggesting that nurture the baby, protect the child, and free the adult. Here, the domestic industries are in the same condition. We have to protect them from the foreign competition because they are not enough to fight with the developed markets or developed goods, because they are not sufficient capacity to compete with the developed market. We have to protect through the protectionist policy. Then what are the demerits that we can list here? When we go through the protectionist policy, some demerits poses like inefficient use of natural resources. When we follow protectionist policy, we should not, we may not allow the goods and services freely move from one country to another country. Then the resources is not used at efficient manner, as in the case of free trade policy. When we impose protectionist policies, it is the common phenomena that the growth of monopolies is a common phenomena in the domestic market. In the domestic market, many monopoly players are there. They will control whole market and dominate over the consumers. Then the exploitation of consumers. Exploitation of the consumers is the common phenomena when we impose protectionist policy, because the monopolies will rule the domestic market and fix the high prices for their production. The consumers will be exploited by them. Growth of inefficient industries is feasible due to because of protectionist policy. Because the indigenous industries or the domestic industries are not enough to compete with the global level due to because of many issues involved there. That's why the growth of inefficient industries is feasible when we follow protectionist policy. The unequal distribution of wealth. Due to because of protectionist policy, the wealth will be distributed unequally among the population due to because of protectionist policy. It divides the population rich and poor. The monopolies who control the market will get much benefited from the internal trade. Then fall in international trade. The volume of trade will be declined. The size of the international trade will be declined when we go through the protectionist policy, because the volume of trade determines the capacity of that country. Even though India right now has reached nearly 138 crore population, still we are not reached 2% in terms of global trade partnership. India only accounts for 1.3% of global share in terms of international trade, global share in terms of international trade, indicating that international trade, the volume of international trade also determines the level of development. And when the countries are going through the protectionist policy, automatically the international disputes will arise. From the history, we have been observing that the oil embargo sanctioned by the United States of America over Kuwait, Iran, Iraq made some social as well as economic consequences very eagerly. And then danger of becoming permanent. The protection measures may become permanent measures for the domestic industries. It is the one of the dangerous phenomena will be observed in the demerits point. Then when we come into the practices side, what are the practices that we have been observing in international trade? For the sake of practices, international trade involves financial activities through the tariffs. These are the practical issues involved in international trade. Tariff is one of the protectionist measure that is followed by the many countries. A tariff is a tax imposed on importable goods and services. In the sense, it is a tax levied on the importable items. It is one of the common measure of protectionism, protection policy. The countries use it to protect their goods from the foreign competition by levying a tariff. What are the types of tariffs? In many competitive examinations, these questions are commonly asked from the Adorama Duty. What is Adorama Duty? Adorama Duty is levied as a percentage of the total value of the imported goods. So it is levied as a percentage of the total value of the goods imported for like 5% of tax or 10% of the tax of that value of the goods is levied in the case of Adorama Duty. What is specific duty? Specific duty is levied as per physical unit of the imported goods. So in that case, the tax is levied as per physical unit of the imported good. For example, in case the country importing 500 kgs of what we call goods, apple. So per unit, they levy the unit, for example, 5% per kg. It is not levied in terms of values. It is in terms of kgs or meter or barrel. It is specifically levied. For example, 5% of taxes per kg of apples imported, or 10% of taxes. That is tax imposing. That is fixed by the tax imposing authority. Then the compound duty is the amalgamation of both ad valorem duty and specific duty. It's the amalgamation of ad valorem duty and specific duty is called as compound duty. First, sliding scale duty. It is also used when sometime government levies import duties which vary with the prices of commodities imported. So this type of duty also levied in international trade. Then on the basis of country-wise discrimination, we classify the tariffs like single column tariff, double column tariff, conventional and countervailing duty. What do you mean by single column tariff? A single column tariff is a uniform rate of tariff. It is non-discriminatory in nature. The tariff rate is same to every country is called as single column tariff. Then what is double column tariff? It is different rate of tariff is levied on different countries. Here, the countries will not follow the uniform rate. The rate of tariff is different from the one country to another country in the case of double column tariff. When coming to the conventional or general tariff, it is a tariff generally announced by the government as its annual tariff policy. Usually, government in every year announces annual general tariff policy is known as conventional tariff policy. In that policy, it proposes the tariff rate on the goods and services transacted from one country to another country at what rate that was fixed by the government. The other one is countervailing duty. The one of the important duty, that is, it is an additional duty. It is additional duty imposed on the commodity whose export prices reduced by other country through an export subsidy. The countries will promote the goods and services by promoting through subsidy activities. When they give subsidies to their country, their productions, their goods and services, the price of that goods and services will be declined. Then the subsidized goods, the prices of the subsidized goods will be seems to be like the low in an international market. In order to equalize the price of the subsidized goods, the government levy the duty on such a goods through countervailing duty. Yes, we have to know the effects of tariff. Effects of tariff: when the tariff is imposed on the goods and services, on the importable items, the production effect is positive because we produce the same goods what we trading at international market, what we importing at international market, can produce at the domestic market due to because of the price hike. When we impose the tariff on importable items, the prices of the importable items will be hiked. This will promotes the domestic producers to produce the same good what we are importing in domestic market. The consumption effect is negative because because of tariff, the consumers will get loose due to because of increased prices of the importable items. The prices increased due to because of tariffs. The consumers will consume less because of operation of law of demand. The consumer will lose the market. The consumer will experience through the negative effect. What is the trade effect? Due to because of trade effect, the production effect and consumption, the amalgamation of production effect and consumption effect indicates the trade effect. The volume of trade will be declined at ultimately. The volume of trade will be declined ultimately, indicating that tariff is a trade decline. Tariff indicates, tariff promotes, tariff discourages international trade. Tariffs, any tariffs on the importable items discourages the international trade activities. Then the another thing is that on what amount the country can levy the tariff on goods importable. The economists suggest that the optimum tariff that can yield maximum benefits to the world community. The optimum tariff is the tariff
Sir, we can't hear you now.
Hello. Am I audible to you, sir?
Yes, sir, you're audible. Your PPTs are in the same place.
No, madam. Actually, I go through moving that slides continuously. But what happening? I am not. Yet.
Yes, sir. Now we can see. You're audible now, and visually we can see you here. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. The optimum tariff is the tariff which maximizes a country's welfare. In the sense, the country can benefit it through imposing tariff when the positive effect of tariff is greater than that of negative effect. In this case only, the country can benefit it through tariff. A tariff imposing country will be experienced through the benefits if the tariff rate is at optimum rate. The elasticity of importable items, that import goods, greater than 1. If the elasticity of importable items greater than 1, then the tariff, the optimum tariff will be declined. If the elasticity of imports less than 1, suggesting that the optimum tariff is negative. The optimum tariff is negative. So indicating that the country should have to follow the optimum tariff rather than regressive tariff in order to attain the maximum tariff benefits. And apart from the tariffs, many non-tariff barriers are there in international trade. Non-tariff barriers are much more rigorous than that of tariffs. Non-tariff barriers are the basic obstacles to imports other than the tariffs. These are the administrative measures that are imposed by the domestic government to discourage the importable items. Then what are the non-tariff barriers that are available to the protectionist policies? The quota systems is there, voluntary export restrictions are there, multi-fair arrangements, health and environment standard issues are there, production subsidies are there, government procurement is there, anti-dumping activities are there, export credit subsidy are there, countervailing duties, trade aid, custom valuation and classification. These are the major non-tariff barriers that the countries have been following. Once again, these non-tariff barriers are very rigorous in nature compared to the tariffs. Then, what is quotas? One of the important concepts in international trade are quotas. Quotas are administrative measures of the government, then alternative to the tariff system. Under import quota system, a fixed amount of a commodity in volume is allowed to be imported into the country during the specific period of time. Means a particular amount of importable goods in terms of volume is decided by the controlling authority, namely government. During that time, only the fixed amount of imports can be importable. After that, government levies much more tariff for the import of additional import of the goods and services beyond the limit fixed by the controlling authority. So many types of quotas are there: tariff quota, unilateral quota, bilateral quota, mixing quota. These are the major practices practicing at international trade. Then, what is the key differences between the tariffs and quotas, which will affect much on the importable items? Quotas versus tariffs. Quotas are speedier and tighter than the tariff. Compared to the tariff system, tariffs, quotas are very regressive. They are they impact very speedier level and very tighter than the tariff when we impose quotas on importable items. Then these quotas are more discriminatory in nature compared to tariff level. Quotas can't lead to improvement in balance of payment. Balance of payment can be correctable through the tariff measures, but not quotas system. Tariffs generate income to the government because it is a tax levied by the government on importable goods. But quota system could not generate a profit to the government because it is only a physical measure about importable items. Then dumping, another very important concept in the international segment. Dumping refers to that when a company or a country exports a product at a price that is lower in the foreign market than in the prices of the domestic market. Dumping is the process, is the business where a country selling its good at very low prices at international market than in the domestic market. These type of dumping activities are very rigorous in the international market, exploiting the developing economies by dumping the goods and services at lowest cost produced by the developed economies into the developing economies. Because these dumping activities have a good number of objectives. That is to find out the place in the foreign market, to sell the surplus of the commodity produced in the domestic market, and also expansion of the industries mainly pertaining to the developed economies. These dumping activities are very competitive in international market. Most of the developed countries dumping their advanced goods and services at lowest prices, even though the marginal cost of that productions, the marginal cost of that goods is very low at represented in terms of price at international market. Then types of dumping. What are the types of dumping that the countries have been following? The sporadic dumping, in the sense when domestic production of the commodity is more than the target. Then the persistent dumping. The demand for foreign goods is highly elastic, when the demand for the domestic is less elastic. In these conditions, the persistent dumping takes place. Predatory dumping, when monopoly firm sells its commodity at very low prices or at a loss in the foreign market in order to drive out some competitors from the international market. Then the reverse dumping also takes place in international market. When one country dumping to the other country will also dump to the dumping countries, the previous dumping countries, that named as reverse dumping. But predatory dumping is very dangerous. It seems to be very dangerous to the developing economies, because it completely washes out the domestic producers from the competition. So predatory dumping, it seems to be the very dangerous actions. Then the very important concept, namely balance of payment. Balance of payment is a mirror of international business of any country. It provides all statistical figures with respect to the country's trade performance. International trade. The activities of international trade is expressed through the balance of payment. The balance of payment of a country is a systematic record of all transactions between the residents of a country and the rest of the world. Without balance of payment, the concept of balance of payment, we can't conclude the international trade. We can't study international trade without the concept undergone through the balance of payment. Then the balance of payment, it is a systematic record of all transactions of goods and services of a country during a period of time, during particularly a year. Balance of trade concedes all goods and services traded in a country through export and import activities. Then what is the meaning of balance of trade and balance of payment? In most of the competitive examinations, this question was raised. What is the difference between balance of trade and balance of payment? The balance of trade contains only the visible items, that is the visible physical goods exported and imported. The balance of payment considers both visible items as well as invisible items, namely goods and services, and also capital transfers. So in terms of scope, the balance of trade is a narrow concept, whereas the balance of payment is a broad concept which considers all activities of international trade. Then this slide presents how the balance of payment operate in a country. It has two dimensions, two wings. One is credit items and debit items. Credit items always receipts items and the debit items are always payments items. So it has three accounts, namely current account, capital account, and official settlement account. The balance of trade takes place at current account, very importantly. The balance of trade takes place at current account. The current account, capital account, and the official settlement account, these are all considered when we calculating balance of payment. Then, what is the basic balance of the balance of payment? By name itself, balance of payment. The payments should be balanced. The payments and receipts should be balanced. It should be in equilibrium condition. The sum of a current account and the capital account is known as basic balance. If the country exporting more items and importing less items, then it's said to be balance of payment is in surplus because the receipts are greater than that of payments. The other condition is that when receipts equals to payments, that is exports equals to import, is said to be that balance of payment is in equilibrium. Means all exports must be equal to all imports. All receipts must be equal to the all payments, called as balance of payment. Is in equilibrium. When export are less compared to that of imports, in the other hand, receipts are less than that of payments, is treated as balance of payment is in deficit condition. It is unfavorable condition to the economy. So the countries like us, many developing economies like us have been facing deficits in balance of payment due to because of high volume of importable items. We have been importing much more items, much more goods and services compared to the exportable items. That's why our balance of payment are always seems to be the deficit in its balance. Then what are the major causes for the disequilibrium in balance of payment? So just we go through the what are the factors responsible for disequilibrium in balance of payment due to because of structural changes advocated. The structural changes happened in the domestic market. The changes in exchange rate, the frequent changes of exchange rate at international forex market, the cyclical fluctuation take place at international market. The changes in national income of the domestic country leading to the increase in demand for the importable items. The price changes of the the importable items, the prices of importable items are always low compared to the exportable items, then it leading to the problem of balance of payment. The stages of economic development, at the starting stage of economic development, we have to import large number of goods and services for the process of development. That's why the problem of balance of payment will occur. The capital movement, the fundamental disequilibrium are the major responsible for the disequilibrium balance of payment. Then how to correct this disequilibrium in balance of payment? There are many measures are there. We can correct the disequilibrium in balance of payment by adapting these policies. What are those policies? So devaluation or expenditure switching policy. Devaluation. What do you mean by devaluation? The one of the important concepts pertaining to international trade. When a country devalues its currency, the price of foreign currency increases, which makes import dearer and export cheaper. Devaluation is a discretionary measure of the government. It devalues its currency in order to promote exports. In order to promote exports. Then the adjustment through the capital movement from one country to another country. The government has to stimulate the exports by giving exports tax holidays, adjustment through the income changes. Government can use the direct control measures in order to control importable items and also thereby correct the disequilibrium in balance of payments. In what are the policy measures that we have to correct the balance of payment deficit? The country should have to follow the contractionary monetary policy in order to cure the balance of payment problem. Because when the country imposes contractionary monetary policy, leading to that, the balance of payment will be surplus in future days. Then expansionary monetary policy leads to balance of payment deficit due to because of high demand for importable items. When the central bank follow the expansionary monetary policy, then it leading to the balance of payment deficit due to because of high demand for the importable items. That's why the monetary economists suggesting that the loanable fund market and the investment and saving market should be equalized in order to achieve balance of payment equilibrium. Then what are the fiscal measures are there to correct balance of payments? There are contractionary measures are there. During that deficits, when balance of payment seems to be deficit, government has to reduce the expenditure on general public and also raises the taxes at international in domestic market. Both monetary policy and fiscal policy need to be used in order to achieve internal balance as well as external balance. Then what about forex market? The very important segment of the market is forex market. It is the used financial market in terms of transaction and by volume. Foreign exchange market. So international market consists forex market. Foreign exchange market is the part of international trade market. What do you mean by forex rate or foreign exchange rate? The foreign exchange rate is the rate at which one country is exchanged for another. In the sense, the price of one currency is expressed in terms of the other currency is termed as foreign exchange rate, forex rate. In the sense, we use the foreign exchange while we engage in international trade. The foreign exchange rate, the concept of foreign exchange rate is only coming at international trade, not in the domestic trade. Then what is the foreign exchange rate? We use the different currencies in the international market. The rate of Indian rupee is expressed in terms of the US dollar. The rate of Indian rupee is expressed in terms of the US dollars. That is, in these slides, we can observe there, the rate of US dollar, $1 is expressed as 74 Indian rupees, is termed as the exchange rate. The rate of €1 is expressed in terms of Indian rupees, that is, €1 is 85 rupees. In the sense, the exchange value of the currencies is determined at international market, that is foreign exchange market, where the international trade take place. As like demand and supply determine the prices of goods and services. Here also in foreign exchange market also, the supply of currencies and the demand for that currencies also determine the exchange ratio of that currencies. So these are the major issues involved in foreign exchange market. Then what we know, how to exchange rate is determined. How the exchange rate is determined in international market. the exchange rate of one currency with respect to other currency is determined on the basis of some activities, some ways and means. How that determined spot exchange rate system is there, forward exchange rate system is there, fixed exchange rate system is there, flexible exchange rate system is there. Right now, we have managed floating exchange rate system. In that, central bank fixed the rate of exchange rate at some extent, managed floating exchange rate, suggesting that up to some extent provided to float in the exchange rate. When it reaches uncomfortable stage, the monetary authority, usually central bank, intervenes in foreign exchange market to smooth out fluctuations in the exchange rate. In India, we are also following this type of exchange rate system in India. And another important concept in international trade is devaluation. Devaluation is a discretionary measure of the government. It refers to the reduction in the exchange value of currency in terms of other currencies. In order to correct balance of payment, in order to reduce the importable items, government may follow devaluation policy. When devalue its currencies, the value of external value of that currency seems to be depreciated over the other currencies. In India, in the financial year 1949 and 1966 and 1991, Indian national rupees was devalued during that time in order to correct balance of payment problem. When we devalue our currency, our currency will become cheaper to other countries. Then our exports also become cheaper to other countries. At the same point of time, the imports will be costlier. The foreign currency will be costlier when we go through devaluation policies. Then what is the difference between depreciation and devaluation? Depreciation, the term D and D, they have a different meaning in the forex context. The value of currency is depreciated due to because of increased demand for foreign currency. The value of currency is depreciated due to because of increased demand for foreign currency. It is activated through, it is channeled through market forces, namely demand and supply. Demand and supply determine the value of the exchange rate. If the value declines, then it is called as depreciation. Devaluation is a discretionary measure of the government. So, devaluation is the discretionary measure of the government. The value of external value of the currency will be declined through policies, not by the force of demand and supply. So, depreciation, devaluation should not be used alike. They are different. They have different meaning. Then what are the objectives of devaluation? Devaluation has the following objects in order to push the exports of the country and also discourage the imports and also to correct the payments of balance of payment disequilibrium and to make adjustment in the currency value at the forex market and also to reduce debt burdens, particularly extended external burdens, to achieve higher economic growth of the country, to increase the standard living of the people of the nation. These are the major issues involved in the action of devaluation. Then in addition to that, we can see the effect of devaluation through this slide. Devaluation makes external value of currency cheaper in terms of another currency and thereby leading to improves in the balance of payment. Then economic integration. Today, the whole world is integrated by the integrations of countries' market. The highest degree of integration is economic union that we have been seen in the case of European Union. All economies have been trading at international trade by grouping themselves, by establishing free trade area, custom union, common market, and economic union. The first and foremost order of integration is free trade area, followed by custom union, then followed by common market, finally the highest and the advanced stage of integration, that is economic union. European Union is the best example for economic union. In that type of economic union, even though harmonization of economic policies are also made and unification of economic policies are also made together, and also these policies should be benefited, should be made with the interest of economic union. Then what are the another segment is international institutions, namely World Trade Organizations. World Trade Organizations is there. It is an international watchdog. It's the watchdog of international trade. It monitors the trade activities of developing nations, member nations. So it is a intergovernmental organization which regulates the international trade. Officially, it was started in 1995 through Marrakesh Agreement. It was signed by 123 nations in 1994. Earlier, GATT, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, was there. It was replaced by WTO in 1995. WTO came into existence since 1st January 1995. Why the WTO established? What are the principles followed by the WTO? On what basis WTO has been functioning, we have to know. Trade without discrimination, free trade, predictability, and also promoting fair competition, encouraging development and economic reform of the country. These are the major principles followed by the WTO to promote free trade among the nations. Predictability through the binding and transparency of the nations. Encouraging development and economic reforms of the member nations is the major principles followed by World Trade Organization, also called as watchdog of international trade. So earlier, the GATT system was there, the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, so which was established in 1948 as a result of the international desire to liberalize world. During that, after Second World War, the countries came forward to establish GATT in 1948. So that GATT was replaced by WTO in 1995. So present Director General of WTO belongs to Nigeria. Jevela is the 7th Director General of WTO. She belongs to Nigeria country, and also becoming the first woman and first African to serve as a Director General of WTO. So these are the key factors that influence on world trade, because most of the time the developed countries occupied this status. Now the developing countries are also voicing at World Trade Organization. Another segment is international financial institutions. Very important. They are practically important. After Second World War, many countries came forward to establish international institutions. These institutions established for the sake of common interest, Usually, their owners or shareholders are generally belongs to national governments. Many of the international institutions are like multilateral development institutions. The majority of the institutions can be grouped as the World Bank group is there, regional development banks are there, namely in the World Bank group, IBRD, IDA, IFC, that is International Bank for Reconstruction Development, IDA, that is International Development Association, International Financial Corporation, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, International Settlement of Investment Disputes, International Monetary Fund, these are all belongs to World Bank group. Then the regional development banks, that is African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, Inter-American Development Banks are there, Bank of South, then European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. These type of markets are there, banks are there, are functioning at international level. And one more thing is that other regional financial institutions are also functioning. Like in India, we have Export-Import Bank. Export-Import Bank. European Investment Bank is there. And Export-Import Bank is there in USA also. These are all the other regional financial institutions functioning at international level. The International Monetary Fund, IMF and IBRD are considered to be the twin institutions. International Monetary Fund is the custodian of international foreign exchange. It's called as the custodian of international foreign exchange. Presently, the Kristalina Georgieva working as a managing director of International Monetary Fund. This fund was established by 44 nations under the Bretton Woods system in 1944. After Second World War, the countries came together to discuss to establish such institutions at Bretton Woods. Due to this Bretton Woods agreement, the IMF came into existence in 1945 and functioning since 1947, have the headquarters in Washington, D.C., USA. At present, it has 190 members as of now, right now. Then what are the common objectives of IMF? The IMF has the common objective to promote international monetary cooperation and also facilitate the expansion of balanced growth of international trade, and also to promote exchange rate stability among the nations between the countries, and abolition of disequilibrium in balance of payment through designed channels of international monetary fund. These are the major objectives of IMF. In order to fulfill this objective, IMF has been functioning very well at international market. Another segment is International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. It is also a twin institution of pertaining to IMF group. It's also known as World Bank. IBRD is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. It provides long-term capital assistance to the developing countries. It is also proposed in the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944 and then came into operation in 1945. Presently, it has 189 members. The present chairman of World Bank is David Malpass, functioning as a chairman of World Bank. Then what are the goals of IBRD? The goals of IBRD in order to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger of the world and also achieve universal health and also achieve universal primary education and also reduce child mortality and also improve maternal health of women and also combat with HIV, AIDS, malaria, and COVID-19 and other diseases. IBRD ensures environmental sustainability through policies of nations. and also develop a global partnership for development. These are the major goals that the IBRD has and also functioning to promote development activities at international segment. Then, what are the important financial terminologies in Forex market that we have to know? When we come to the Forex market, the major things that we have been observing is that the forward exchange rate system is there, hedging system is there, arbitrage system is there. We have to know that system. What is forward exchange? Forward exchange is a contract to buy and sell foreign exchange against another currency at the same fixed rate in the future at a price agreed upon now. Means the agreement has made now about future rates, future price. Then the hedging is a device of covering exchange risk against the price of foreign currency. It's a device of covering exchange risk against the price of foreign currency. Then arbitrage. Arbitrage refers to the purchasing of foreign currency in one market where its price is low and to sell it in some other market where its price is high is called as arbitrage. In economics, the speculative activities, we call it as also speculative activities. So by saying this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you for your kind attention. I over to Dr. Nandish and Ashwini Madam. Thank you all. Thank you, sir. Hello.
Yes, sir. Students, do you have any questions? Students, do you have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you, madam. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, 1 minute.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your depth knowledge about how international trade activities taken place, terms of trade, trade areas, need of a trade policies, merits and demerits of a trade, dumping, devaluation, balance of payment concepts, and economic integrations. What is the role of international trade agencies towards the international trade? Then what are the developing countries relating to the trade activities. So it was a very useful and informative session, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having you on this program, sir. Thank you. And now I request all the participants to enable the your videos to take a photo for a few minutes. Thank you. Take screenshots. Thank you so much, sir. Students, now you can disable your photos and you can log out.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.